I'm James Rule. Welcome to the Lonely Leader podcast, where we help existing and aspiring leaders find clarity, build resilience, drive performance, and enhance fulfillment. I want to talk today about a specific element of leadership pressure, an area that I think a lot of you will resonate with, but perhaps don't articulate. This isn't about the pressures that we expect, the pressures of hitting a target, chasing KPIs, realizing the vision that we've set for ourselves. This is about the pressure that comes when you are handed a situation not of your making, when you find yourself in the wreckage and you suddenly become accountable for that. You have to find the solutions. Everybody's watching, everybody's got an opinion, and you have to face that pressure, overcome that pressure, and keep moving forward. As regular listeners to this podcast already know, I spent many years operating as a CEO of professional rugby clubs. Now, one of the scenarios that really brings this pressure to life that I experienced so frequently, almost a constant companion through that leadership journey, and that was injuries to players. Now, it's very difficult to overemphasize how challenging and stressful this is. And it transcends sport. But fundamentally, imagine the scenario where you have a roster of players. These are the players that are going to take the field every week and represent your organisation. And as with all contact sports, but particularly in rugby, injuries occur. So at the start of the year, you have your best team. And sometimes as many as 3 or 4 huge proportions of your talent pool can get injured in just one 40-minute half of a game. And when those injuries come, I'm not talking about little bumps and bangs that can be resolved in a couple of weeks, but major injuries to knee joints, shoulders, that require months, if not an entire season on the sidelines. The pressure is unbelievable. You then step into that wreckage I talked about, and you have to lead. But you can't communicate fully, not without undermining people. You have players that are playing injured, but you can't use that as a justification. You don't want the opposition to be aware that player X has got a real problem with the shoulder, because they will use that information against you. And naturally, due to injuries, your team cannot perform optimally. So you have to put replacement players in. But if you critique that or overly communicate that, you are undermining the people who have the opportunity to step into the team. You can't say, well, player X is injured and we've only got player Y. He's no good, she's no good, but we'll hope for the best. And of course, when your top line talent doesn't appear, you're relying on younger, more inexperienced players, performance suffers. And what happens when performance suffers? People get frustrated, your supporter base, the media have opinions, your supporters have opinions, sponsors have opinions. And you stand in that space having to absorb that pressure and continue to lead, continue to try and galvanize people, particularly your staff, your players, your coaches, to help them continue to move forward. Now, I use that example to highlight the loneliness of leadership. Not lonely in that traditional sense of there's nobody around. I don't get to talk to anybody. I'm shipwrecked on a desert island. Not that pure definition of loneliness, but loneliness where you are, yes, surrounded by people, many of them hugely supportive and want the best. But as the leader, ultimately, you have to shoulder the majority of that burden on your own. And there is only so much you can say. And even those very supportive people, you can't share the full picture. So that, for me, is an articulation of the loneliness of leadership. And you might be saying, well, yeah, I get it, I don't get it, but just use that analogy. Imagine your senior leadership team or the senior highest performers in your organization, whether you're in education, finance, tech, it doesn't matter what sector you're in. Now imagine sending 20% of them home for the next 3 months. They can't come into work. Then take another 30% of them, send them home on 6 months, full pay, they can't come into work. And I want you to find another 15%, send them home for 12 months on full pay. And you say, well, that's extreme. That's the very scenario that we're talking about here. Major disruption and having to lead through that. I think my analogy of that pressure and the wreckage of injuries in a sporting sector transcends into industry. I work with so many leaders that are appointed into a new role or are promoted into a new role, and they step into that challenge. They step into that wreckage. And wreckage is a very graphic phrase, but I want it to be that sort of proverbial pattern interrupt, because these are the challenges a lot of leaders are dealing with. They step into an organization where the energy is low, where there has been incompetence from previous leadership, or perhaps there has been toxicity in terms of how previous leaders operate. And all of that has drained the energy, the goodwill of their staff. From the most senior to the most junior, it's disempowered people's mindset. And you have to step into that and find a way to move forward. People are looking to you as the new face, as the new leader, to be the solution, to have all the answers to all of their problems, which brings a huge amount of pressure with it. And often, particularly in public sector organizations, in addition to that, you've got a high level of scrutiny from stakeholders, from media. People have opinions. So you are working on two fronts. You're trying to rebuild and re-energize your people from within, knowing that you don't have time, you don't have a lot of space, and every move you make is being scrutinized by people with opinion on the outside who, just as I said earlier, won't necessarily have a full line of sight of all the challenges that you are dealing with. Because just like my injury scenario, I work with leaders that step into that space and they cannot communicate every aspect of what they're dealing with for reasons of confidentiality and for reasons of the ripple effect of blaming, pointing fingers, highlighting underperformance or underperforming individuals. That does nothing to galvanize the organization. So these leaders are stepping back into that lonely space of having to shoulder the burden and move things forward without being able to give people necessarily the full picture, and therefore quieten down some of that external and internal noise and criticism that people would naturally step back from if they knew the full picture of some of the challenges that these leaders are dealing with. Now, you'll be forgiven for thinking, where's James going with this episode? We're meandering along this path together. Well, I'm setting the context. And I know this will talk to some of you with absolute resonance in terms of where you are on your journey currently. With some of you, perhaps not so much, and that's okay. But there'll be some of you who feel like, yes, I'm in that proverbial wreckage. Yes, I understand what James is saying. There's so much more I would like to say to lessen some of the criticism coming my way, perhaps internally, perhaps from above, from boards, shareholders, etc., perhaps externally, from patients, customers, media, etc., whatever sector you're in. But I can't say it all. So some of you will really feel where I'm going with this. And why is this so important? Well, this pressure doesn't go away. And I want to show you that I really empathize with it, that I've lived it, I've experienced it, because authenticity is a huge part of who I am and the Lonely Leader brand, and the fact that we pull so heavily from lived life experience. And it's dangerous when you feel this pressure, because even the strongest amongst us can start to buckle. And there are other strands to this pressure. So we've talked about that inability to fully communicate, to fully justify what is going on for fear of compromising the organization or individual. So you have to absorb some of the criticism, knowing full well it isn't fair or just. The other side of the pressure is you come in with a clear understanding, a vision of what needs to be done, what needs to change. But you're also pushing against that disempowered, low energy, lacking resilience environment that's been created. And so the challenge here is to keep the courage of your convictions, to keep moving forward with what you know needs to be done. But when you're absorbing criticism on the one hand, some of it unjust, you're unable to defend it properly. And then on the other hand, you're trying to step forward with change. And as with all change, it's often resisted. You start to feel this pressure almost suffocating you. And this is where leaders can stumble and say, is it worth it? I'm fighting on the one front. Maybe I don't need to push through as much of this change as I thought. Maybe I don't need to have as many difficult conversations. Maybe I can just pick a slightly different route. And we start to compromise on that vision. We start to compromise on what needs to be done. And yes, that takes some of the pressure off in the short term, but it is not the long-term solution. You will resent what you are doing. And it's about, no, what I'm doing is right. I just need to find a way to get through it. And this is where I get so much fulfillment supporting leaders to say, you're on the right track. Let's work through this external, internal pressure, but don't lose the courage of your convictions. You know what needs to be done. Let's start making that happen. So where I try and step in is to galvanize, to reassure, hey, you're on the right track. And then you start to see a shift. And this shift, I wish I could just say it's a simple process. Do X and Y and then you're there. But it's a more of a series of steps. But I look to start to see this shift. And it's an awareness, a recognition that I will never be fully understood. Now, that might sound like an admission of defeat. It's far from that. But in the most senior leadership positions, particularly those ones in the public eye, you invariably, for all the reasons I've talked about in detail today, can't give the full picture to help people understand. And even if you could give the full picture, some people have closed their minds to want to receive that information. It's too different a viewpoint to their viewpoint. They're not willing to take it, or perhaps they can't quite see the context or the positioning. So accept the fact I will not be fully understood. And as a consequence of that, not everything I do will be popular or well received. But it ties back into a theme I talk about a lot. We need to look within. We talk about self-validation versus external validation. As a leader, particularly in these complex situations, particularly when you're stepping into the wreckage of a situation, it is impossible to please everybody. If you try, you will not make any progress. You will not make any forward momentum. You'll be going around in circles, flipping and flopping on your own views and your own decisions and your own strategy, trying to please everybody. Conversely, if you look within, what do I believe needs to be done based on the intelligence around me, the feedback from my people, the evidence I can see with my own eyes? What do I believe needs to be done? Even if it's not necessarily the most popular thing, that is where we need to go. And it all starts from recognizing I will not necessarily be understood. And if I take you back to my world, for so many years operating with which on paper looks like a fabulous team, hugely disrupted by injuries, I recognize you've got to stop trying to change the perception. You could come up with a really justifiable argument. Well, look, let's put our top team out on paper. Let's do a spreadsheet of injuries. Let's show what proportion of the salary cap is missing, what proportion of our team. Let's draw analogies. You can only do that so often. And some people will not want to hear it. Yeah, I don't care about the injuries. Find other players we need to win. Yes, but we've got to pay these players and they're injured. Don't care. Find me more players. We've got to win. I think it taught me, and it's another key theme, another key message, is control the controllables. Bring your energy back to what you can control. In that scenario, I can't control, once a game starts, whether a player breaks his leg or dislocates a shoulder. So we have to move back to the controllables. And whatever stress and pressure we're dealing with as we navigate out of that wreckage, what can I control? Let's park what I can't control. Even if there's 50 things I can't control, duly noted. What can I control? I can only think of two. That's fine. Let's do those two. Then ask the question again. And those controllables give you a North Star. They give you almost like a rock to cling to in the storm. And as criticism might be raging around you, a negative opinion might be swirling, you can look yourself in the eye at the end of every day and say, based on the information that was in front of me, did I control the controllables? Did I take action? Did I have the courage of conviction to stay on my plan and to move things forward? And that's the question we need to be answering every single day, as opposed to what do people think of what I'm doing? What's the perception? Should I change this? Should I change that to get a better perception? No, look within, know what needs to be done, have the courage to stand on that, keep moving forward, and control the controllables. I hope you can feel the passion I have for this project. Leadership is hard, particularly senior leadership. Everybody knows what you should do. Everybody's got an opinion on what you should do. Sometimes those opinions, both internally from within your own organization, externally from within stakeholder groups, media, etc., can be quite vociferously delivered. We've all heard that phrase, everybody's a genius with the benefit of hindsight, and that's often where the most aggressive forms of criticism can come to the fore, because people have the benefit of hindsight to see how you have stumbled and where things could have been done differently. This pressure, this ongoing challenge is not an admission of weakness. That's a really important thing to stress. It's an acknowledgement that senior leadership's hard. If it was easy, everybody would do these roles. And this is one of the biggest challenges, being able to manage yourself and your people and navigate through these periods of pressure, these wreckage scenarios that we've talked about. It's not continuous, but there will be periods in your tenures as a senior leader where you do step into that wreckage. For me, it was those big injury crises, as I've alluded to. Why is this so important? And to really sort of bring my authenticity to the fore, well, this drove the very branding of my business, The Lonely Leader. That wasn't picked as a negative, as something that was just a catchy phrase to garner attention on LinkedIn or what have you. It was built from my lived life experience, my recognition, my deep understanding that senior leadership can be particularly lonely and isolating. And the more I researched, the more I spoke with other senior leaders, I saw the same. So The Lonely Leader was my first nod to that this isn't weakness, it's not you, it's not that you're an imposter, it's not that you don't have the capability. There is nothing wrong with taking a deep breath and saying, this is tough. This is tough. The pressure, the feedback, the criticism, I can't say everything I want to say. For all the reasons we talked about in this episode, I'm feeling this weight. Now, that weight is normal, but what we do with it and how we manage it is critical. So I have seen many a leader stumble and succumb to the physical manifestations of that sort of pressure. Burnout, illness, mental health challenges. I myself have talked candidly about collapsing with pneumonia. That was a physical manifestation of probably shouldering too much of this burden, internalizing it, not looking after myself, not finding the right mechanisms to support my physical health, and my body saying, enough, James, we're going to let you know this isn't sustainable. So the lonely leader exists to step into that space with people and say, it doesn't have to be this way. The weight is going to be there. The pressure is going to be there. These wreckages are going to come to the fore. The internal negativity may percolate from parts of your organization. The external negativity may percolate, but do not face it alone. There are tools, there are tactics, there are strategies that every leader can implement to give themselves the resilience to move through. There are huge benefits from finding the right network around you. Your own personal board of directors, if you will, is the way I like to position it. A combination of friends, mentors, coaches that help you process, deconstruct this pressure so you can keep moving forward. I hope this episode has resonated. This isn't just a sales pitch. This isn't me making things up to make it sound right on a podcast. I hope what comes to the fore, my thought process when I was preparing this episode is, I want you to feel the lived life experience. I want you to understand that I recognize and empathize with where you are when you're feeling the immense pressure of senior leadership, particularly if you have just stepped into a new role or been promoted into a role where there's been significant change, significant turmoil. You don't need to be in the sporting sector for this to resonate. I use my experiences of injury as this unbelievably frustrating disruption. It's not something you created, but it's something you're expected to fix. How many of you are dealing with something that you didn't create and you are expected to fix? How many of you are dealing with it without the right support network? How many of you are just pressing on, head down, dig, 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 hoping that your mental and physical energy and capabilities will just last as long as you need them to? I'm here to tell you that's not the plan. You need the right support. First and foremost is awareness. Secondly is tools, tactics, and strategies. And third is the right mentors, coaches, and support around you. So if this has resonated and it's something you want to explore further, then please do get in touch. Leadership does not have to be lonely. There is a better way, and it will be my absolute pleasure and privilege to explore how I might be able to work with you to support you navigate through those challenges. I wish you the best of luck on your continued journey of growth and development. Thanks for listening to the Lonely Leader podcast. I'd be very grateful if you could share and follow if the content resonates. And if you're looking for additional free resource to support your continued growth and development, then please do check out our social media and website details in the show notes. Remember, quality leadership on the outside must always start within.